Hi everyone. Hi everyone. Good evening. I hope you're doing well. I think many of us are in the Boston area, so I think we're all a little more chilled than we were this time last week. But I hope you're staying warm. I'm really excited to be here and to talk about the job search process. This is what I have been doing and talking about for almost a decade. I spend a lot of time over the years and still on a daily basis working with mission-driven professionals to help them make career changes, both big and small, and to really operationalize a plan for that transition that helps them get results. Let's see here. My mouse is working. So let me just say a little bit about my background. So very much by accident, I fell into a role where I was doing a lot of academic searches. So I don't know if anyone here has ever worked in academia or is familiar with that world, but it was one of my first jobs right out of college, and I just took it because I was, taking a year off before going to grad school and just needed to pay my rent. But I actually really fell in love with working with people from the hiring perspective. And I started in faculty searches and eventually moved to staff. And, if you think about your own experience in the workforce, you can imagine that going through the hiring process and getting to meet people for the first time and hear about their experience and their enthusiasm for the role, I always think of it as like everyone's in a good mood, everyone's doing their best early on in the process. So it was actually a lot of fun, especially to work with folks who were passionate about education. And so I really, really loved it. But I did have a plan to, go back to grad school. And I did that. I got my graduate degree. I managed a lab at MIT Sloan for a few years because my love was research. But it was in that role that I realized I really missed the hiring process. And I couldn't imagine kind of going back to that now that I had my research degree and I was doing that full time. And so Work Wonders careers really started very organically as a little side hustle. My friends would come to me and I would work on their resumes and help them interview prep. And now it's my full-time gig. So that was actually almost 10 years ago that I first started Work Wonders Careers. And now I have a small team, and this is what we do day in and day out. Let me drop some links here. You can find us online, obviously. So we have a blog, we have a podcast, and I'm on social media much more than I should be. So if you're looking for more detail on any of the pieces I'm going to cover tonight, you can certainly find me in several places where I'll continue talking about these things. Let me drop these in the chat just so that you have them. This is the podcast, Reimagining Ambition. So one of the things that I really focus on with our clients is making sure that people are tuning into their needs, their goals, their strengths. And we say making moves that matter. So we really try to help people not operate from a place of should or panic, but from a place of alignment. So a lot of what I'm going to share with you tonight is going to be strategies and tactics that really make sure you are at the core of your job search, that you are in the driver's seat. I think there's a lot of people who give job search advice. It's a tough market right now, right? It's a tough time to be job searching. And so I think that can kind of cause people's anxiety to go into overdrive. And I want to show you and share with you some of the common challenges that folks have and how we help people address them and move forward. So I'd love to just sort of get a sense of who's in the room and where people are in their search. So drop a 1 in the chat if you are like at the very beginning stages, very tentative, unsure, barely getting started. If you find yourself scrolling through jobs or saving jobs or emailing yourself jobs, but not really consistently applying, drop a 2. If you are lacking confidence or direction, drop a 3. If you're struggling to land interviews and offers, but you are applying, drop a 4. And if you're just like, I'm completely overwhelmed, the job market doesn't feel great, I don't know what to do, drop a 5. You can drop more than 1, by the way. In fact, that's usually the most common answer. Okay, so I see a good mix here. Got a bunch of, I see some 1s, I see some 2s, I see a 4, a couple 4s, some 5s. Yeah, there's a lot going on. And at any given time, people are at very different stages in the process here. So Here's what I'm going to cover. I'm going to tell you kind of how we're going to walk through this and what the 5 mistakes are that I'm going to talk about. We're going to talk about lack of preparation and like what a job search preparation needs to look like. Because a lot of people are operating without a North Star, and we really don't. Someone, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At least there's a smiley face at the end. That's good. We'll take that optimism and put it to good use. That lack of preparation can often lead people to have a hard time making decisions, have a hard time tailoring their resume for specific opportunities or speaking about themselves. So I really think that preparing strategically from the get-go is actually going to help with everything that follows. So that's where we're going to start. Another common challenge that I see here is focusing on the quantity of applications and not necessarily the quality. And I'm speaking specifically about resumes here. It can apply to some other things as well, but I really want to emphasize that our clients do not rely on applying to hundreds of jobs in order to get results. Sometimes it's very tough to slow them down, but generally we really focus on making sure that resume is aligned to the target jobs, and I'll share a little bit about how we do that. And then, of course, LinkedIn, which is something a lot of people tell me they know they should be there. They have an account, they log in, they do some scrolling, and then they kind of log back out. They're not really sure what they're doing there. So we're going to talk about why you need a plan for LinkedIn and what that might include and might look like and how you might want to prepare for that. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about the interview process, how to prepare and why it's not just an audition, what you need to be looking for and doing in the interview process in order to make sure you are landing jobs and pursuing things that are going to be a good fit for you. And we'll talk a little bit about how to assess your work along the way too. So if you're, kind of in action mode and you're doing a lot of work, but you're not getting a lot of results, it'll be important to hit pause and reassess. And sometimes I think that that forward momentum, which I love because that's sometimes hard for people to kind of conjure, sometimes it's not doing us a lot of good. So there can be a lot of wasted time and energy in the job search process because people are just trying to put as many applications out there as possible. So we'll talk a little bit about how to look at what your work looks like and make some decisions to re-strategize. Sound good? Now, I just want to say a quick note before we begin. As I was, working on some of these slides earlier today, I was like, mistake feels like kind of a harsh word. It has been a tough few years. It's a tough year currently. It's a particularly tough moment in a tough year, I think it's fair to say. And so when I'm using the word mistake, it's definitely not coming from a place of judgment. They're really super common challenges. And what I wanted to convey and what I'm hoping to convey tonight is that these are sort of bottlenecks for a lot of job seekers, okay? And we want to really think about what we need to do to create some space, to reduce the tension, and really help people kind of keep moving forward. So I don't offer any of this advice to suggest that the job search is going to be quick or simple or, end as quickly as it begins, or like with, no sense of what the market looks like. I know it's tough for a lot of people, but I do really believe that these strategies will save you time and make you more effective, and hopefully help you manage some of that stress along the way as well. Should we dive in? Okay, so let's talk about lack of preparation. If you have experienced a layoff or you're in a job that you hate currently, it's really easy sometimes to just skip over the part of the search that's just for you. The preparation phase of the job search is the only place in the job search really where we get to think about who we want to be, what we want to do, what we want to pursue. We get to be 100% honest here. This is a place where not everyone has to see what's going on. This is the behind the scenes of the job search. And like I said, it's really where we start to deliver identify the North Star. So you'll know you're here and you should come back here, right? This is a challenge for you if you're struggling to articulate your interests, goals, and skills. So if you're struggling to, communicate to people what you're actually looking for, or if you're not sure how to even pick jobs, maybe you're feeling all over the place with your search. That's something I hear a lot from new clients. You look at jobs and you're not sure where you belong, what you're a match for. Then probably what's happening is you are not as prepared for the search as you should be. It's really helpful to spend some time looking at jobs and making some decisions about how to focus your time and effort here. So this is where we want to begin. When we skip this, like I said, we miss that internal process. So if you are coming, and most people are these days, coming to the job search with a fair amount of like stress and burnout, and I'm going to even say like work trauma, there's a lot to there's a lot of layers to this for a lot of people right now. And so I think it's really critical that you have some space to think about what you've gone through, what you've learned, what you want instead. People are learning how to, communicate to recruiters and hiring managers that their last boss was terrible or the workplace was dysfunctional. And so you want to have a behind the scenes, you want to have some practice and some space where you get to be honest and candid with yourself so that you can figure out what you need and how to distill that story throughout, your job search. When we skip this, we also lack focus, alignment, and strategy. So a lot of times when I'm talking to, people who are potential clients, I will ask them what their target roles are, and they'll have jobs all over the place. And so for most people that I'm working with, they already have some skin in the game. They need to make a certain amount of money. They want to be doing things in a certain way. Like they're not really willing sometimes to accept some of the jobs they're actually applying for. Sometimes they're, not, in a different geographic area. There's a lot of Hail Marys sometimes that get thrown. And a Hail Mary is okay. It's okay to throw a Hail Mary once in a while, but it's not like a real everyday game-winning strategy, right? So we really want to make sure that we have some clarity on where we're going, because that's the target for our resume. It's the target for the rest of our preparation in this process. So we don't want to skip it. And the most important thing is we want to be communicating our qualifications effectively. So if you're not sure where you're going, it's going to be hard to get there. I like to call this sort of like a minimum viable self-reflection process. And before I share these, let me just say a couple of things. There's a few things that you can do. We have exercises for our clients. We have them look at jobs, kind of look for common themes within the jobs, but we also just do coaching work and self-reflection work. So here are just some prompts that I always like to ask people because they generate really helpful, compelling content. I always, always, always ask, what are you most proud of? And oftentimes this is really compelling content, and also it's nowhere to be seen on a resume. So allowing yourself to, identify this can be really helpful. And sometimes what's interesting about this question is it's not really a result or an outcome or an accomplishment, but it's like how someone showed up in a toxic situation but still tried to contribute, or how someone showed up in a situation that was under-resourced and kind of not running well, but held the team together through their morale. And I think that is a really compelling story potentially when you're interviewing, but it also tells us a lot about what you probably want and need out of your work environment. So these prompts can kind of give you a lot of mileage if you spend some time here. Another thing that, another couple of questions that I ask are, what do you want more of? And what do you want less of? And the what do you want less of question seems to be pretty easy to answer. I think we can all think of our jobs and be like, here's what I'd like to get rid of. But I think it's also important to think, what do we want more of? Like, what are we looking for? What are we aiming for? And being able to identify that when you see it, either in a job posting or in the way a hiring manager describes the team is really important. And without it, sometimes we just get into performance mode. We just get into like pick me mode, and we're not really chasing that fit and alignment that I think is so important for so many of our clients. And then, of course, what environment or culture do you do your best work in? This is really critical. I don't think people would make nearly as many career changes or transitions if they were treated well at work. And so really thinking about what that means for you, because people have different levels of tolerance for different kinds of dynamics. I have some clients who like thrive in really toxic environments because, they have tons of vacation time, right? Like they'll totally put up with it, or it's, fully remote. So I want you to really think about, what do you need out of your job to make it worthwhile? Like that's a really important thing. And too quickly people skip that and go straight into like, please hire me immediately. So we want to be able to do the work so that we can evaluate different opportunities for ourselves and not just rely on throwing a ton of applications out there. Mistake number 2, this is, remember, we're following a sequence here, really. This is once we do the self-reflection and the preparation for the job search, all of that turns into really good content for the job search. So whether that's the resume or the LinkedIn or the cover letter, or even what you're eventually going to say in interviews, the more work and documentation you do there, the easier the rest of this will be. So I think that's another reason it's so important. And what we like to do with a lot of that content is use it to update resumes and to have people better use their resume. And one thing that we do that's a little bit different is that we really have people focus on using their resume strategically. We do not encourage our clients to apply for dozens of jobs a week. I don't have too many clients in the many years I've been doing this that have really applied to tons of jobs. I suggest that the strategy that we use is a minimum of 4 to 8 targeted, tailored applications per month for at least 2 months in a row before we make any changes. And I'll talk more about that strategy as we go. If you're in a full remote job search, then you're going to want to be on the higher end of the volume probably. But for people who are looking at like hybrid roles or flex work roles or in-person roles, like the 4 to 8 minimum over the course of 2 months is really working for people. So we focus on application volume. We don't focus on volume over quality. We focus on the quality of the resume to the job at hand. So let me just say a little bit more about what this looks like. And I do have a podcast. It's the most recent podcast episode, actually, about our 3-step resume strategy. So here's just kind of a quick overview. When people come to work with us, the resume is one of the first things we assess for, assuming they have clear target roles, right? So they've done the preparation. If they haven't done the preparation, we can do that with them. But in terms of like writing a resume for them, like this is what happens. Like we assess their resume, we look at their target roles and figure out sort of like what needs to change. And then we work with them one way or another to make sure that they have a strategic resume template. This is something that is easy to read. It does not need to be fancy. It does not need to be beautiful. In fact, it's better and best even if it's just really simple. So I write everything in Google Doc. I use Arial font. I use one boring, bullet point. I do things in bold, and then that's basically it. It's very simple because what's compelling about a resume is the degree to which it conveys the qualifications. And one of the ways we help people do that is to help them tailor every one of their resume in at least one way. We have kind of a strategy for doing this that I'll share a little bit more. And again, we're focusing on fewer and better applications. So some people are like, well, I'm applying for 20 jobs a week. Like, how can I tailor all of those? Probably by not applying for 20 jobs a week. I always say if you want to apply for more than 4 to 8 targeted tailored roles a week, I can live with that. But make sure you're doing the bare minimum of the targeted tailored roles applications, because that's really where people are getting traction. And you want to give your applications time. So I'm going to show you how we tailor a summary at the top that's very easy to read and speaks directly to your qualifications. And you'll get better at that as you go. So the first few applications our clients do are a little, slow, choppy, a little more challenging for them to do. But once they get the hang of it, they move much more quickly through them and it doesn't take as much time. We also want you to use your resume consistently. I'll probably say this again in the next 30 minutes or so, but you'll never job search faster than the hiring process. And some people will apply for jobs, not hear anything, and be very quick to assume like, my resume sucks, like they don't like me, like I'm a problem, I don't have the right stuff, or no one's looking at my resume. And the truth is, there's just a lot going on behind the scenes. A lot of recruiting teams have been just decimated. There's lots of applicants right now, so it can be very slow and tedious to go through it. Roles are being put on hold. And so you just really have to kind of account for that. And that's where our volume comes into. Like, I think you need to be planting enough seeds, knowing that you can't harvest everything, right? Like not everything is going to come to fruition, and that's okay. Like if you are broad enough and consistent enough, that will be okay. Another critical part of the strategy, and this is, I think a challenging one for a lot of folks, is one of the reasons our clients are so successful landing jobs applying cold online is because we really encourage them to focus on jobs they're well qualified for. Like I said, Hail Marys are fine, but like 80% Hail Marys in a job search is not fine. And we don't want to take, I mean, it's fine for it's fine for you, it's fine for me, but I don't think it's a winning strategy for really moving the job search forward in any sort of like efficient way. And I'm not a newbie. I've been around for a while, so I know people get jobs they're not qualified for. But with so many applicants right now, I think it's really worthwhile to focus particularly on the applications where you know you're going to be a good fit, where you really do check those boxes. So let me just walk you through our process a little bit. I'll show you the strategy here because this is really impactful for people. So if you can get a good grasp on this, I think it will have the potential to change the way you job search. The first thing we really pay attention to is we read that job posting. And that might sound silly. It might sound, like something you're already doing, something that's a given. But what I find is that people often respond in their resume or cover letter to the responsibilities section. But what I respond to when I work with resumes and clients, I respond to the qualifications, right? So I want to make sure that we're focusing on the qualifications because the responsibilities are what you'll be doing in the job, but the qualifications are what they want to see that you have in order to execute those responsibilities. So it's an important shift because that's really what your resume needs to demonstrate. It needs to demonstrate your qualifications. That's what recruiters are looking for. Now, this qualification piece trips a lot of people up, and I have a lot of thoughts on that. We can talk about that at the end if that's of interest. But really, what I see are people who are either quick to assume they're completely unqualified for the jobs they want. And I see people who completely dismiss the qualifications and are like, they don't matter anyway, so I'm throwing my hat in the ring. I try to treat it very literally. You're about to see why in a couple slides from now. I think it's really important that we take seriously, if we want to have a relationship, and by relation, we want people to hire us, we want to have a relationship with people. It's important to listen to what they are asking for and to understand what is at stake, what they're expecting. It's going to help you manage your own expectations, and it's going to help you communicate more clearly. You're essentially going to be a better listener, a better responder to what the needs are of the folks who are doing the hiring. So please, if you are someone who's on the side of things where you assume you're unqualified for everything, please ask yourself, how am I qualified? Yeah, yes, Mary, I think that is often true. So women seem to be quick to assume they're not qualified. I have really good examples of this. I don't want to, use too much time on them, but let me just tell you, people have the qualifications a lot of the time. So I harp on being qualified, which can bum people out because they feel like they're missing things. But oftentimes people are actually more qualified than they think, and they're just not communicating that clearly or effectively in their resume. So it is something we do really want to assess. And then, of course, we need to revise our resume. I agree. Let the company reject you. Yeah, okay, that's fair too. I want you to write your resume like an actual human being is going to read it. This is one of my top 3 controversial job search takes, but truthfully, I would never talk about applicant tracking systems really if I wasn't really just constantly bombarded with questions about how to get around them and navigate them. They don't work the way a lot of people make them work. They're just a way to manage hiring at scale and also to maintain compliance, which was actually my job. So that's really what I did. Recruiters only get a certain amount of information that you are submitting to an ATS. And most of the time, speaking for myself, I bypassed a lot of the manually entered information and just opened the resumes. So I want you to write a resume like a human being is going to read it, because I really think that makes a difference in how we communicate. A bunch of disembodied keywords is not really where we want to be. How do you pick job postings if you think you may not be qualified because of lack of exposure to the environment, right? If you're a career changer, I think this is tricky. So I would want to try and find roles where you are qualified. And so a lot of times when people think about a career transition, they want to make a 180-degree change immediately. And sometimes that works out. So I'm not going to say that's not possible, but in a super crowded market, that's harder to do. Like 2 years ago, that seemed a lot easier to do. But now I don't think we're in the same situation. So I want you to think about, what is a 45-degree change? What is a 15-degree change? Can I be at the right kind of organization in a different role? Can I be in a different industry? And think about making that 180-degree change over time in smaller changes. But also just keep an eye out on the qualifications themselves, because they may have like very entry-level jobs. I actually just had a client today who is a career changer send me a job that had 0 to 5 years minimum experience required. So pretty much everyone has 0 to 5 years of experience. So don't assume that there won't be jobs for entry-level folks, and don't assume that a career change is just one move. And that's been true always. Like, I have a lot of folks who've made career changes by like first changing industries and then changing functions or something very similar. So I know the font here is like not super super big. That's okay. It makes me feel better. It makes me feel better only finding few that I feel qualified for. Yeah, that might be the case. So I don't think you should feel bad about it. All the more reason to like make sure those applications are like, you spend good time on them. They're really quality. So I have this job posting. These are actually, it's not a job posting, just qualifications from a job posting. And mostly what I want you to see is that it's like over a dozen bullet points. It's long. The details don't really matter. I just want to show you sort of quickly how I'm seeing this so that you'll understand the next slide here. So you can see here, like, this isn't a super technical position. This is, social media, some email, social media analytics, Adobe Creative Suite, Office, right? But these are their technical skills. Then we have things like years of experience and marketing communications, communication materials, print, web, digital. So it's like some areas of expertise. And then we have, soft skills, organizational, time management. And then we have some, what I just think of as like personal attributes, energetic, flexibility, takes initiative, attention to detail. Okay. So this is a lot. I think writing a summary of qualifications, which is a strategy we use to help clients effectively tailor their resume and better stand out when they're applying online. It's hard because it needs to be concise. You don't have all the time and space in the world to communicate in a resume, right? So let me just give you a brief overview of how this works. And I know I've got the slide design with an image here, but you can imagine like on a, in a Word doc or a Google Doc, this is not terribly long at all. We have 4 bullet points here. So a summary of qualifications is 3 to 5 bullet points that summarize how you meet the qualifications for the job at hand. And it really helps set the narrative for who you are as a candidate or as an applicant by putting the most valuable, most relevant experience at hand. Now, I think we've moved past objective statements at the top of resumes. A lot of people already have summaries, but the summaries they have are about them. This summary is about how you meet the qualifications of the job at hand. And I think it's really important. I just actually worked with a software engineer last month who had 2 areas of interest that were very different. He had health tech experience and gaming experience, and was using the same resume for both. And we created 2 templates with 2 different summary of qualifications. And we allowed each template to like really highlight, focus, and speak to the required skills for each different type of role, right? And you can see like that's really important. It's really important that you not reuse a lot of the same language that makes sense to you or was from another job that was in another area. You really want to be mirroring some of their language back at them. So you can see, I called out the years of required experience. I called out the areas of expertise. I called out the skills. I called out the soft skills as well. So instead of just having a bunch of words that you think are keywords, and I'll talk more about keywords in a bit, I think it's really important to very concisely tell them exactly how you're qualified. Yes, Brooke, we don't use objective statements. I mean, it's not really abnormal to still do it, but like as a practice, like our consulting business doesn't do that. Because really, I think an objective statement is evident. If you're applying for the job, I think we have a good sense about what your objective is. And instead, we use that super valuable space right at the top of your resume, underneath your contact information, and above pretty much anything else. We use it to write a summary of qualifications. I'll just pause in case there's any other questions here. Sometimes I get a lot of questions here. And also let me make sure I didn't miss anything in the chat. Okay. I don't see anything, so I assume we're good. Let me actually just come back here for a second. For folks in the room, like who are software engineers, like this person, or just has like a, a more complex tech. This is a very junior person. And the more senior you get, even if you're still mid-career, like you probably have a lot more content here that you might want to include. So for most of my mid-career clients, I don't include the technical skills in the bullet points. I'll sometimes, in fact, I'll often create like a technical skills section just underneath where I will share all the platforms, applications, and software that folks are using. For software engineers, I will break that out into like languages, infrastructure, and all that stuff, just so that it's clear at the top and easy to read. It's often still in the qualifications for a job. And then that leaves the 3 to 5 bullet points to be about any other content that might be there. If you're on the other end of the spectrum, where instead of having like a dozen or more bullet points to address, you have like 2 bullet points to address, then I think the strategy still works and it's okay to borrow content from the responsibilities section. But for the most part, there's usually enough content in the qualifications. No more objectives, just use professional summary or summary of qualifications. Yeah, I always tell people what you call it is not part of the strategy. So if you want to leave personal summary at the top, I totally fine with that. But taking the time to do this bulleted list, because I think that's easiest to read, where you're responding directly to the qualifications in the posting, is a game changer for a lot of our clients. Okay. I will continue on, but please feel free to, to drop questions as we go here. So let's talk a little bit about LinkedIn. Now, I almost always start with the resume, because I find that it makes everything else easier. Working with a client, talking to them, and getting the information that I need to really make sure we have a revised and strategic resume makes writing a cover letter and also coming over to LinkedIn a lot easier. So that's why LinkedIn is as after the resume here. And I think it's a mistake, or at the very least, it's not a great use of time to be on LinkedIn without a plan. It's probably not a good idea to be on any social media platform without a plan, but I do spend a lot of time on social media. So let me just speak to the one where I actually have a plan for here. There's a lot of different options. A lot of people will just come to me and say, what should I do with LinkedIn? And the response I always have is, what do you want to do with your LinkedIn? What are you hoping to get out of this? Sometimes people, we have a conversation and these are just some of the things that come up. You want to increase your visibility to be found by sourcers and recruiters who are looking to fill roles, headhunters. Makes all the sense in the world. Maybe you're there because you want to meet new people or reconnect with people from your past. Also a great strategy. Most people are on LinkedIn because jobs are posted there. So it's a great place to be for that reason. And honestly, that's enough of a reason. Some people don't really want to engage or invest any more time. I think it has a lot of potential, LinkedIn. I really like using it and I see it being successful for people. But I also just really admire and respect people who have like barely any social media presence and don't spend tons of time of their life on here. So I can make peace with that. It's also a really good opportunity to reinforce your qualifications for target roles. So in case recruiters or hiring managers come over to your LinkedIn profile from, your resume, I think it's helpful to be there and add some legitimacy. They can see your work experience and all of that. So that can be helpful. You can also be nurturing relationships and visibility. To be honest, I don't think content creation is an impactful strategy for most of our clients. We do work with people who become self-employed and all of that. That's a different thing. It can be very useful for that. But for people who are trying to be, on payroll in general, I don't think that that's a super impactful strategy, but it can be a good way to stay connected to people and be engaged in your field. So I think it has its utility for sure. And then I also see folks who are looking for, contract work, temporary work, freelance work, to bring in income while they're job searching. And it can be good for that too. So you really have to think, why do you want to be there? Because that's going to inform our next steps. It's going to inform, what kind of content we put there and all of that. So let's keep going here. Most of the time, so I'm just trying to pull some of these together just to show you what like a typical client might do. We want to be using LinkedIn to look for target jobs or other interim work. That's usually a known priority. And that means that we want to potentially be found. We want to be found via search, if possible, just to maximize the ability to be found via search. I think for a lot of people, that is no silver bullet, especially at this moment in time. But I think it's a good investment to make, to really think about what are people looking for when they might be looking to hire someone like me. So I have keywords in quotes here because I don't mean any random words related to a job. I mean really speaking to the qualifications of target jobs in both your headline and about section. And I actually took, I think it was in August, I took a workshop on LinkedIn with LinkedIn. It was facilitated by LinkedIn staff. And I was struck by how they emphasized the content in the headline, especially as being highly valued in their search. So we want to really think about, sometimes people make up all kinds of language to use here, and that can be fine. Like you could have any goal, and that could be appropriate to kind of, use that space as you want to. But with my clients who are job searching and they're looking to kind of maximize their visibility and be potentially found, it's really helpful to again mirror some of the language that's found in those qualifications, to not brand yourself in some way that's completely unrecognizable, but to use language that's embedded in the majority, if not all, of your job postings here in both the headline and the about section. I also think comments and messages, like I spend most of my time on LinkedIn, engaging with people in the DMs. So I think that can be a really helpful place for relationship-oriented strategy. So if you're trying to expand your network or reconnect with your network, I think messages and comments can be really, really helpful. And I also think it's really great to identify other opportunities. So whether that's events or roles or gigs, these can also be things, if they're not for you, that are shared with folks in your network who might be a better fit. So I think these sorts of goals make sense for most job seekers. You might have sort of a different case or a different set of goals, and we can workshop that. But for the most part, we really focus on using LinkedIn to find jobs, using LinkedIn to communicate qualifications and experience folks might be searching for, using it to reinforce relationships, and using it to find other potential opportunities. And you can set it, I didn't say this, you should set a timer. If you find yourself spending a lot of time here, or like it's one of those days where there's just like a lot of layoff notifications, like these are conversations I've had with clients lately, is like sometimes being on LinkedIn just feels like a bummer. And I can completely appreciate that. So, do what you need to do, set a timer, be efficient, have jobs emailed to you, do the job alerts. Don't go on every day. Like there's no reason to necessarily be doing that, especially if you're getting jobs emailed to you. So I think it's also helpful to have some like boundaries for yourself here. And that's why we have a plan, because your plan could be 15 minutes every other day to check your DMs or something like that. So I just kind of want to share what I think works really well in terms of both the professional headline, and do people know what I mean when I say professional headline? So if you log into your LinkedIn, you see your name and then that text that's underneath, that's often like your current job title, that space is your professional headline. And what I like to do here is ask a client to look at 3 or 4 job postings with me, the target job postings. Now your resume is tailored for each job, but your LinkedIn actually needs to work for the breadth of your job. So that's why I like to look at 3 or 4 job postings and really think, what are the major skills and experiences that are showing up across these postings, right? And so that's how we end up with categories like this. This one is for actually a friend who is in higher education. So it could be online learning, leader and coach, people and culture, adult learning, educator, trainer. This is language we pulled, out of her target jobs. It reflects titles and qualifications. And so that's just a way that we positioned her. I think like most searchable content, cute isn't as good as just like straightforward. It's not, none of this is like an exercise in like super compelling creative writing. We're just wanting to kind of use people's language back at them. And then we made sure to reuse that language with a little bit more context, because this person's goal was to not just to enhance their searchability, but to also, demonstrate some expertise. This person is fairly high up. And so we wanted to add some specific examples. And you can see this is not particularly lengthy. It's just, it's actually like four very short paragraphs, built around the major domains of her experience, and then a brief example of each, like 1 to 2 sentences. Sometimes these are a little bit longer, but this person really liked to be concise. So when it comes to LinkedIn, complete is great. So it doesn't need to be cute, doesn't need to be clever, doesn't need to be witty. It can be those things. And if that's easy content for you to create and you like that, go for it. But I see a lot of people sort of agonize over, how to do that. So I don't want people agonizing. I want people moving through the process here. All right, mistake number 4, focusing on impressing people instead of resonating with people during the interview process. So a lot of times when I talk to clients, one thing I notice, I'll say like, how was your interview? And the question I want them to answer is, how was your experience during the interview? What did you learn? Are you interested? Are you more interested or less interested in the role? But the first thing they do is they tell me how they think they performed, which is almost universally, not an A plus. And so I just want to say that I think a lot of my clients interview better than they tend to give themselves credit for, obviously, because they're successfully landing jobs. But let me just walk you through this process that we have, because I really work hard to make sure that people don't go into an interview process where they're just performing, where they're just auditioning, where they're just like, hoping someone likes them. But instead we enter into it as a relational activity to attempt to build and assess for the potential of a connection. So we do revisit some preparation here. We want to make sure we're documenting examples of accomplishments. You might have already done that. This is also a good opportunity to, consider potential questions you might be asked. And of course, know a little bit about the company. I find people will do the deepest possible dive on the company, but not invest any time in thinking about their own expectations in this process. Like, what do you want to hear or see during this conversation? How do you want to be treated? How do you expect to be treated? And how does that work out? What was your ultimate experience like? A lot of times when people describe interviews that they think went sideways, it's pretty clear to me someone showed up unprepared to interview them. The interviewer was unnecessarily hostile, which happens a lot in academia. So I know it, I know it from experience, but also happens a lot in tech. And so sometimes people just come in and don't treat you well. And then I think people get anxious. I'd rather people be able to identify dynamics that aren't quite right than to assume they've done something wrong in the process. I'm keeping an eye on the time, so I won't go into a ton of detail here, but I'm a big fan of the STAR method. I think there's like a newer acronym, but like I love the STAR method for helping people distill their stories for interviews. It's a little old school, but it's the situation, task, action, and result. And what I'll say about here, this helps you, it's a storytelling framework, right? And I think I want people to be spending a lot of time on the action and result and minimal time on the situation and task. This is particularly helpful for people who've had toxic work situations or things that they don't really want to talk about. You only have to give like nominal context to help people understand why the action and the result was so impactful. Some practice that interview best practices here. And the best practice is to practice. I've had a few clients like go on a bunch of interviews, and I feel like after that, it was really transformative. Nothing caught them off guard. They practiced their answers over and over again and got really confident about them. They knew what to expect. So I actually think the best way to become really good at interviewing is to just have a lot of experience doing it. When you're doing your storytelling, be sure to focus on results and insights. A lot of times people aren't sure how to talk about conflict, or challenging situations, but that can definitely be navigated. And you just want to focus on what you did to resolve issues as best you could. Another thing that happens quite a bit, and we've kind of chatted about it a little bit, it's shown up in the chat here, is sometimes people have a hard time taking credit for their work. And I think it's really important that you define your relationship to the outcome. So when I'm working with clients, especially on their resume, they'll be like, it was a team effort, we did it together. And I always like to say, like, what was your relationship to the work? Did you lead it? Did you contribute to it? What was your part? And then what was the collective result? I actually think the instinct to like give everyone credit is better than, you know, a patriarchal approach of just taking all the credit. But I also want hiring managers to hear what you all have to say about your work. So I think there's ways here to define your own relationship to the outcome and also provide the context of what was ultimately part of a group effort. And that can make for really compelling storytelling. Another thing that I think is really important and that not enough people do is when they get a question that they've never heard before or takes them by surprise, just ask for a moment, like just ask for a pause. Part of our practice with clients is to make the interview a little bit more conversational so that it's a little bit more comfortable. And if you can't take just a moment to pause and like, you know, gather some thoughts for a new question, if you don't feel comfortable doing that, like what would it be like to work with these people day in and day out? So I think by being human, you know, and not just showing up polished with like packaged answers ready to go, but really by turning this into like a conversation, I think your job search will be better served in terms of alignment. I also just want people to expect to be treated well. Okay. Like when I was doing this, like even if we didn't hire people and we knew we weren't going to hire people, like they still had a good experience with us. They still would have said those people were nice to me. They were very polite. They asked me other questions. And that's how it should be. People should not be going into interviews expecting to be, you know, not treated well. I don't expect that. And then, of course, I want you to have a process where you think about how it went. And I don't just mean your performance. It can be really helpful to identify what feels hard in an interview. Maybe you're lacking stories in a particular area. But really, I want you to think too, like, how is that experience for you? Like, do you want to work with these people? So really use that interview as an opportunity to assess that. Now, let me just talk a little bit about consistency because I realize I'm running out of time here. So I want to just make sure we have time for question. You'll never job search faster than the hiring process. I'm really sorry about that. I know that's a bummer to hear. And I know the hiring process can take a long time, but you will need to be strategic. You will need to use your time and energy and effort consistently. So I really recommend that you set reasonable and flexible goals, find the resources and supports that you need, expect and anticipate and make peace with the ups and downs along the way. I think that's just the norm. There's not too many people not having that experience. So it just means you're engaged in the process. The downs do not mean you are doomed. It's also really important that you take care of yourself along the way. And I really encourage folks to track their work. It's really helpful for me to see what applications, what the summary looks like, how many jobs they've actually applied for. Sometimes the job search is so mentally taxing, you're not really applying for as many jobs as you think. You're just stressing about it. And I know that can take a lot of energy, but it's not going to help you land an interview, right? So we want to make sure we're doing the right things to get the results that we're looking for. And this is also an opportunity to assess and reassess as you go. You may realize you need to pick up the pace on the application. You may realize you've got tons of applications out there, but you haven't been tailoring them. So tracking this can be really helpful in the long run. I think I'm going to skip. I do a couple slides here. Whoops, I'm going the whole wrong way. I always show these slides, but I want to make sure we have time for questions. So these are just, I did a Google stock image search for job seekers, and this is what it came up with, but I thought it was a little overwrought and dramatic, but my clients told me like, no, these are accurate photos. So I always just like to say, just because you're here now and feeling like this about your job search, you could be a lot closer than you think. And sometimes all it takes is a couple weeks for things to really turn around for people. So I just want to say thank you for letting me get all of that out. And if we have time, I'm really happy to take questions, and I'll drop my contact information as well here. Yes, my pleasure. Any questions? Oh, good. Glad to hear it. Oh, good. Okay. Okay, let me stop sharing.
Yeah, a lot of very positive response. Thank you, John, so much for this amazing talk. A really treasure trove of super helpful insight.
Oh, good.
Um, yeah, would you prefer for the attendees to maybe just unmute themselves and ask questions if anyone has a question, or would you prefer people to drop their questions in the chat?
Yeah, the chat's totally fine.
All right.
It looks like we have a question over here from Mary.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Mary, that's a really good question. It's not even the first time this week that I've answered that question in a resume. So I really do like using the traditional resume format. Especially if you're referring to something like a functional resume format, I think it helps people tell their story better and more consistently. So I can say I think I've done one functional resume in 10 years and it wasn't my preference. So the client wanted one. And I don't think it was the best option. Do you advise that people change their role title to match job posts? So I don't think you should change your current job title to something that's not accurate, because that's something that can be verified in an employment or background check. And you don't want to not be, accurate about what that is. But you can use like a functional job title in parentheses after it. So sometimes people will have, like just like a branded unique title that doesn't translate well, but they're just like a customer success manager. Like that's how they're functioning. So you can use parentheses to describe that, and that can be in after the actual job title, and that can be helpful sometimes. Yeah, problem. That's a really great question, Hina. He's saying, how do I know how much preparation is enough? I'm not sure that you can know that, honestly. I don't know. I'm open to other people's suggestions, but I see people doing a ton of preparation. And I think what's tricky about interviews, and I don't want to say especially tech interviews, but like I see this a lot with my technical clients, is some people will treat interviews as a way to assess your skills and ability to execute the job. That's what you're supposed to do. Some people use interviews to make people scream and to see how they do under pressure and to flex on their own skills. So I would say, prepare, and then also like pay attention, like consider, if you've had 3 or 4 interviews, how did that go? Did you feel like you prepared enough? And was the issue lack of preparation, or was it people like not managing an interview particularly well or strategically? Because oftentimes that's what I hear, is that it sounds like an interview gone awry. Should I add, as a freelancer, should I add that to the resume or just say software engineer? And in the interview, bring it up if needed, asked. Brooke, I think you have some options. Like, I don't think you're obligated to list work experience as just like a full-time paid employee. You could indicate freelance, but I don't know if that doesn't make a difference in terms of the nature of your work and skills. I don't know that you need to call attention to that necessarily. Mary says, what do you recommend we do about job gaps? Do we add in volunteer and group affiliation information, 1 page or 2 page? So your resume does not need to be 1 page. That's like a very outdated, unhelpful construct unless you're, fresh, out of school and don't have a ton of work experience and it fits naturally on 1 page. The thing that we prioritize is readability. And I'd rather have older work experience on that 2nd page than have like, size 9 font and like no margins that make your resume really, you need like a microscope to like get a sense of what's on the resume here. So I don't worry about the length per se. Volunteer and group affiliation can be fine. And job gaps really vary. Like, I don't really think about a job gap being an issue unless it's many years. Like, people worry about like weeks and months. I don't necessarily worry about that so much. And then you just want to make sure that you're qualified. Your qualifications are up to date. Yeah, sometimes there's very few margins. It's just like a wall of text. As someone who's a career changer, the resume would be small for someone who's in the role, but is currently studying to So this is a really important question. And I always, when I'm working with clients, want to assume nobody's going to look past anything and that we have to clearly convey our qualifications. I don't think everyone knows this. So your qualifications are like a legal component. The reason that you see them on every job posting is because it's a way that we kind of monitor a few things, but especially like equity compliance work. So it's important to be qualified in order to really be competitive for a job. And I would look for jobs where people don't have to look past a ton of things. Like, there might be things that are flexible and negotiable, but you want to largely be well qualified.
So I know it's 8:01.
Sorry.
I don't want to keep anybody longer than we have to. So yeah, Jen, why don't you wrap us up and we'll be ready to go.
Sure. Well, I just want to thank everyone for being here and thank you for hosting and having me. Let me just I'll drop the links one more time here. Please be in touch if you think you need more help or support in your job search. We'd love to have you. And I'd love to come back for another webinar sometime if you'll have me.
We would love you here.